Just so you know, I have 2 weeks in the week watching TV. So I'm quite sick today, but otherwise I'm alright. You you good? It's been a weird day. Getting phone calls from people all day and putting on the book.
Yeah.
And we've got enough councillors, so we might make a start.
Are we short, Lena? She's not coming.
I'll get to the apologies.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. We'll make a start. I'd like to firstly acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we are gathered here this evening, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. Now on to the agenda. Item 1 is membership. Membership is as listed in the agenda. Item 2, apologies. Councillor Lawrence is on an approved leave of absence, and we have apologies from Councillor Messina. Item 3, disclosures of conflicts of interest. Are there any disclosures, councillors? No? Thank you. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 14th of August. Moved by Councillor Williams and seconded by Councillor McCarthy. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Moving now on to item 5, consideration of reports. 5.1, application to amend a planning permit at 49 Johnson Street Reservoir. Officers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This application does seek approval to change an existing planning permit. The current approval is for a 4-storey mixed-use building, so there are ground floor shops, there are apartments, residential apartments upstairs. The current approval provides for 51 dwellings, so the application for you proposes to increase the height from 4 to 6 stories and the number of dwellings from 51 to 68. Now, included in the report is an outline of those changes in bedroom composition. They are the 1-bedroom dwellings will increase from 7 to 12. The 2-bedroom dwellings will actually decrease from 44 to 40. One of the largest changes in the proposal is that there is an introduction of 16 3-bedroom dwellings. Previously, there were 0. There are 87 car spaces provided in the form of a basement. There remains 5 shops. There's a slight increase to the area of those ground floor shops due to some layout changes. Most of the internal changes are assessed in the officer's report for you as improvements. They're achieved through room size changes. There is also an improved natural light access to most of the dwellings and an overall improvement assessed to internal amenity. The subject land is located within a mixed-use zone adjacent to Johnson Street. It's close to the Cannon Park Station. It's in an area where the Darren Economic Land Use Strategy is encouraging residential intensification, and that's primarily to ensure the survival of that local shop group nearby. In that report, it was assessed that some of the areas that's at potential risk to decline, but it would probably see some revitalisation if there was increased residential development nearby. The challenge with that side of this general area is that intensification cannot happen because of the sensitivities of the neighbourhoods to the rear of that Johnson Street precinct, so along Johnson Street and the railway lane is where the increased development is forecast under our strategy. Notice of this application has been provided as being one objection received. The points of objection are summarised and responded to on page 7. A lot of that relates to the matters that were considered during the original merits decision. So what that means is that the only valid objections have to relate to the changes that are actually considered under the planning permit application. The overall assessment of this application, Madam Mayor, is that it's supportable, does show a high level of compliance with planning standards, improvement in design, particularly in the introduction of a more diverse bedroom composition, improved internal amenity, and subject to the conditions and the recommendation is recommended for support.
Thank you. I have the applicant registered to speak this evening, so may I invite Sue Zhang to to address the committee? No? Okay. I don't have anyone else registered to speak. So, councillors, do you have any questions?
Yes,
Councillor Newton.
through you, Melissa. To the officers, I'm just curious about apartments 9 to 12 and just if there would be enough light in the bedrooms that aren't facing balconies.
Yeah, so what the question is about some of those, the lighting that is or panhandle lot or configured room where there's a narrow corridor into the window and then you've got the standard bedroom at the rear of that. Those particular ones in question are acceptable because the length of that connection before the main bedroom area isn't over 3 metres. It's still enough to let the light go through. They're not ideal in configuration. This has been a regular issue at VCAT. They refuse applications where they've been too narrow. These are not too narrow. They also have refused applications where there's been excessive reliance on that form of design. Generally, less than 20% is acceptable. In this case, though, it's not such an issue because of the width of the window space or window opening and comparative to the depth before you get to the substandard spectrum. They're considered acceptable in terms of their natural light ventilation. Not ideal.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Greco.
Yeah, I just had a question just in relation to the parking and the waiver associated with parking. I note there's just over 40 spaces that have been waived, and I just wanted to get some indication. I know the area a little bit, but would the area be able to, in terms of off-street parking, absorb that 40 off-street parking waiver?
Yeah, thank you, through Madam there. The previous waiver was 37 spaces, and the increased composition is largely that gap's been created by the 16 three-bedroom dwellings. And our transport team have assessed the application and considered that it's quite acceptable that a number of those three-bedroom apartments are supplied with 1, not 2 bedrooms. Councillor Greco is correct, it is an area we have received complaints about parking. That was primarily during the construction period, and there's a resolution, I recall, saying the council was going to continue to monitor this area in terms of the time restrictions to ensure that there remain an adequate supply. So there's definitely a watch on this precinct. The transport team are monitoring what the general supply in those situations for on-street spaces. Their assessment on this application is that that shortfall is primarily created by those three-bedroom dwellings, and they think that there's sufficient provision on site, but also capacity off-site and management ability through council and parking controls to deal with any concerns otherwise.
Thank you. Any further questions? Is there a motion someone would like to make? Councillor Rennie.
Yes, I'm happy to support the recommendation that council give notice to issue the planning permit.
Amend.
Thank you.
Councillor Greco, second?
I'm happy to second.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Look, I share Councillor Newton's concern about some of those bedrooms, but note that that problem existed in the initial application, as I recall, and I think that there are a number of things that actually make this a better application. I think the increase in the parking deficit is actually insignificant when you consider that there's an assumption that every three-bedroom unit will require 2 car parks. I don't believe that to be the case, so I think that it's reasonable to see that parking deficit increase a little. Do I think this is a great development? No, I actually don't. But I think that it is relatively more desirable than what was previously granted a planning permit, and it will provide accommodation of a diverse range of sizes in that location, and I think that's also a desirable outcome.
Thank you. Councillor Greco.
Look, the only thing that I would add to that in support of this application is that there are 16 three-bedroom apartments, which is quite an important shift from the previous application, which had no 3 bedrooms. So we've got at least some good balance in terms of the dwelling choice in relation to this apartment. The other thing that's important, I think, and why I'm lending support to this, notwithstanding that from a design perspective, it could have been better, is that the point that the officers made in relation to boosting the local economy of that particular area, and I think that a development of this size will go a long way in relation to bringing that area up to and making it much more livable and much more accessible also to the local residents. So on that basis, I'm willing to support this application.
Thank you. Are there further speakers? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That motion is carried. The Planning Committee has decided to grant an amended planning permit. This decision can be appealed to VCAT. Objectors have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT. The applicant has 60 days. Notice detailing the decision tonight and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant in the next week. Moving now to 5.2, application for a planning permit at 6 Thackeray Road Reservoir. Officers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please note an error in the agenda whereby a section of text has been omitted from page 30 onwards. The omitted text affects clause 5206 car parking and clause 55 res code assessments. The car parking assessment explains that car parking spaces and vehicle access are being provided in accordance with the requirements of the scheme. The clause 55 assessment explains the reasoning behind recommended conditions relating to private open space, storage, design detail and front fences. The application is for 3 double-storey dwellings, each containing 3 bedrooms with double garages to be accessed by the rear right-of-way. The maximum height of the dwellings, measured to the pitch of the roof, is 7.49 metres. The site is located in the General Residential Zone Schedule 2 and is affected by the Development Contributions Plan overlay. There is no restrictive covenant registered on the certificate of title. The application was advertised and 7 objections were received, as summarised on page 24 and responded to in detail on pages 24 to 26 of the agenda. The double-storey form is considered acceptable in a streetscape where both single and double-storey forms are present. The development includes secluded private open space to all dwellings in the form of ground floor garden areas that can be directly accessed from living rooms. I draw your attention to condition 1F on page 19 of the agenda, which requires the south-facing windows facing Thackeray Road to be redesigned with horizontal emphasis so as to be consistent with the prevailing character. And condition 5 on page 21 of the agenda, which requires the construction, surfacing and draining of the right-of-way to allow for vehicle access to the site. The proposal is considered to be generally in compliance with the purposes of the General Residential Zone and the objectives of clause 55 subject to condition. Therefore, notice of decision with conditions is recommended as outlined on pages 19 to 23 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of objectors registered to speak this evening, so may I call Belinda Taniskay? Sorry. Come forward and you can take a seat at the table. Oh, are you Helen?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, okay. So you'll have 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Helen Tedeschi. I'm representing objector Belinda Tedeschi of 27 Mendy Road Reservoir, who has lodged an objection in relation to the permit application for 6 Thackeray Road. The proposal to plot the driveway to 6 Thackeray Road and use the laneway at the rear of the property with an entrance on Mendy Road as the property's vehicle access road will have a detrimental impact on the objector's property and the surrounding properties and the local community. The property has a southern wall that borders the laneway and another wall is a metre away from the laneway. The objector's property features bedrooms and living areas just a few metres from the laneway. An increase in vehicles day and night in the laneway will cause the objector to be subjected to traffic noise and disruption very close to sleeping and living areas. If the plan is approved and the laneway is subsequently sealed, laneway construction may result in structural damage to the objector's property due to its proximity to the laneway. No engineering reports have been provided to the objector regarding the impact on laneway sealing to the property. Opening up the laneway will cause additional day and night traffic and increase danger to pedestrians and road users on Mendip Road. The laneway is situated metres away from two Route 555 bus stops used day and night by elderly people, young children and families. There is poor visibility when exiting the laneway, and opening up the laneway to further vehicles may result in danger to passing pedestrians and road users. Mendip Road is already congested due to the 555 bus route, passing traffic and seeking to avoid high street and parked cars. No information has been provided to local residents or the objector on how the proposal complies with Mendip Road's traffic management requirements. Further, the proposed development features 3 dwellings and D3 of the plan has been put down directly on the objector's living areas and courtyard. This will affect the objector's privacy and enjoyment of property. Finally, the planning application features 3 new dwellings on a small block that currently contains 1 dwelling with no upgrade to existing services and infrastructure in the surrounding streets. In summary, the objector submits the planning application in its current form. If approved, will cause direct detriment to the objector and local residents. The objector reserves no rights in relation to this matter. Thank you.
Many thanks. You can take your seat in the gallery again. And the next objector is Tony Sullivan. Is Tony here? I just realised I got that timing wrong. I just got the timing wrong. So in total, objectors should have 5 minutes between each of you, and I've just given 5 minutes to the previous objector. So if we can keep this to 2.5 to 3 minutes, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
My name is Tony Sullivan. I live at number 4 Hackaway Road, so I will be direct with impact of proposed development. There is 3 units currently on the planning permit application. All the upstairs bedrooms appear to have windows that look over my property. That will directly impact the amenity of my property and the uses to which I can be able to put it. Also, the use of the laneway as the only method of access to the property for vehicles makes no sense at all. And I refer to 55, where it was quoted a number of times. It actually says access for emergency services, vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, etc. should be considered. That apparently, given that there's a recommendation to accept, it's planning application has been ignored as a requirement. Also, relevant, the laneway is currently used by a number of owners in the street for access to the rear of their properties. One previous owner had a truck that they drove up and down which damaged my fence. And so one of my concerns is that the less 3 metre wide laneway at best. Any damage to my fence, who's going to be responsible for it? And the noise, etc., of vehicles driving up and down is exacerbated by reverberation of the fencing. I also noticed when I logged onto the council's website that, in fact, this application is superseded by, let me just put my glasses on, 9/02/2017, 6 Hackaway Road, Reservoir, Victoria, proposed construction of 4 double-storey units within associated car parking as shown on the plan of the company application, which also shows double car garages, which would then bring at least 8 cars using the laneway as the sole means of access. There is a statement in the recommendation that says that the fact that the driveway will be blocked up and will be reconstructed to be a nature strip, will add car parking and much more room for waste bins. Anybody who uses Thackeray Road on a daily basis knows you're having to pull in to let people through all the time now. People are not going to go around the back to park in there, they're going to park out the front, and it's just going to turn into a nightmare.
Right, I'll have to stop you there because we're now over time.
No.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have questions? Councillor Greco.
I just have one question, just in relation to the, we've heard a lot about the laneway, and I just want to get an assessment from our officers in regards to the laneway, particularly in regards to the access and turning circles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the access, our transport team have had a look at it and they're satisfied that they can get cars in and out in a forwards and backwards direction, so there will be no need to reverse out onto the laneway, and the manoeuvrability is considered acceptable in accordance with the scheme.
Councillor Greco.
Just another question, just in relation to neighbourhood character.
Yes.
And I just wanted to get a bit more background and context in regards to neighbourhoud character issues, particularly in relation to double-storey houses or dwellings in that particular area.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to neighbourhood character, it is acknowledged that there's largely single-storey development in the street. However, the double-storey form is graduated in that it does have a setback from the ground floor level, so that's considered to be beneficial and act as a transition from a single-storey form to a double-storey form.
Thank you. Councillor Rennie.
Could I have a response to the issue raised by the objector in relation to there being another application which has come in for the same property for 4 units? Is this the case, and can you comment on that?
Yes, Madam Chair. There was a previous application on the site that hasn't been enacted, so this application is going following that.
Excuse me, I have to object. It clearly says 2017 4 units.
There was an existing application from 2010 that was approved. The current application is the only one that we have on our books for 3 dwellings. It was received as a 4-dwelling development, so a loss of a unit as a result of RFI comments maybe. Yeah, that was what it was lodged as. So it was lodged as a 4-unit, and following on from the RFI, it became 3. So this is the current application.
So that's it. So just to clarify, that one that you're referring to is the same application that we're considering tonight?
The one and same application. They asked for 4, they've agreed to 3.
And through the process
plans.
of coming to us, it's gone to 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think Councillor Williams had a question.
Yeah, my question is that if there's been an emergency or a fire brigade now, and they get called to this address, wouldn't there create confusion if there's no access via the front? You have to come via a laneway. Like, to me, that would cause a lot of angst if you're living in the property and there's no real direction and you're not actually can get into the actual property.
Thank you. That would be considered a normal situation in quite a lot of residential properties where you don't have vehicle access from the front. This will be beneficial in some ways that it has quite a wide pedestrian access, so if there was need for a fire or ambulance service to access from the street, they'd have quite a bit of width to get their equipment down the side of the site.
Councillor Greco.
I have a motion that I'd like to put.
Would you read it out?
Yeah, I'll read
Is it the one
out.
that you circulated earlier? Or that was circulated earlier?
The alternative motion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll read it out for the benefit of councillors would have received this during the day, but I'll read it out for the benefit of our gallery. The motion reads as follows: that council refuse the application for planning permit on the following grounds. 1, insufficient private open space is provided for the expected recreational and service needs of the occupants of the dwellings. 2, the dwelling 2 and 3 ground floors are insufficiently set back from the common vehicular access to minimise amenity impacts arising from vehicular noise on the occupants of the dwellings. 3, the first floor of dwelling 3 is not set back from the north property boundary in accordance with standard B17 of the Darebin Planning Scheme. 4, the height of the wall on the north property boundary does not comply with the requirements of standard B18 of the Darebin Planning Scheme. And finally, 5, the design detail of the development does not respect the character of the area.
Happy to second.
Okay, so second by Councillor Williams. Councillor Greco, would you like to speak to the
Yeah,
motion?
look, very briefly, I think the 5 points that I've read out are quite self-explanatory, but what I really would like to focus in on, which goes to those 5 points, is that I think this particular application fails on the test of neighbourhood character. And I think that what's been proposed here in relation to having a double-storey development of three dwellings, all of double-storey development, actually breaks the rhythm of the street. I'm very familiar with that street, and it has a certain character about it. And as has been mentioned also by the officers themselves, is that the predominant character of the streetscape is single-storey dwellings. So on that basis, I think it fails really to meet, which I consider to be one of the most important tests, and that's the test of neighbourhood character. Also, it's been mentioned that there are other complications with this particular application. The laneway access is a point that has been mentioned by councillors and also by the objectors, and on that basis, I think that this application needs to be rejected. It's not to say that you can't have more than one dwelling on that particular site, but I think there has to be a dwelling that very much fits into the particular neighbourhood character of that street.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Councillor Weir?
Yeah, I have quite great concerns in reference to the neighbourhood character of the area. I do believe that a 3-metre laneway is not sufficient access to get in and out of a property, especially when you've got a growing number of development happening, particularly in that street. I travel in that street every single day. Sorry, not every day, every school day I travel down that street. And particularly on a Thursday, I forget. I go down there on a Thursday and I go, oops, there's the garbage truck stuck behind it again because I can't go around it. Parking is definitely an issue in that street currently, and I think it's only going to get worse. I do have concerns, particularly as my fellow councillors already mentioned, the neighbourhood character of the area, because we need to be really careful what is getting built, and also the objector has raised the point about overlooking into properties. I haven't seen any visual shots or anything like that, but that would also concern me if the construction of the building and overlooking. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any further speakers?
Yes.
Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Just briefly, I'm speaking in support of the refusal put forward by Councillor Greco. I know the street as well, and I think the character is predominantly single-storey brick houses, and I don't think that this meets the neighbourhood character.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Reid.
Yes, I'm going to speak against the refusal motion, and therefore I suppose in favour of this development, and there are a number of reasons for that. Firstly, on a block of this size, which is just over 600 metres squared, I don't think 3 dwellings is unreasonable, and there's a lot of things about these dwellings that we would actually find desirable in any other application. They include things such as the fact that the site coverage is only 40%, that these are 3-bedroom dwellings. It's not a reverse living typology, and I think, you know, we find that very desirable. We've spoken up as a council group on a number of occasions against reverse living because of the problems it creates for accessibility. I note that the bedrooms, and particularly the main bedroom in these dwellings, is of a really good size, and I think that those things actually mean that these would be quite desirable homes for people. I wouldn't have approved it at 4. I think then we'd see a site coverage that's much larger. I think because they're aiming for 3 on this block of land, what it also means is that at the second floor level there isn't a continuous built form, and there is actually a sense of separation between these dwellings. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any further speakers? No? Before I put it to the vote, I just wanted to clarify that the report was circulated this morning. That will become part of the minutes. So just to clarify that there was an additional report which the officers outlined at the start that will then be incorporated later. So I'll put that to the vote now. All those in favour to support the refusal? And all those against? That motion is lost.
In light of that, I would put a motion that we in fact support the recommendation in the council officer's report and give notice.
The amended report.
The amended report.
Is there a seconder for that? Did we end up?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Mee. Councillor Reid?
Thank you. Look, I've already said a few words, so I'll keep it brief. I do think that here we're talking about 3 reasonably sized family homes offering quite good amenity in the local area. I know that for people who live in streets such as this, it's difficult to see the street change. All streets do change over time. I think that the fact that the frontage of this property won't actually be significantly different from other properties in the street is important. So we're not seeing a much wider built form across the front of the property than you would see for a single dwelling. And in fact, we're not seeing a noticeably bigger building footprint than you might see if someone had decided to purchase this block and put up a McMansion, which could very easily be 2 stories and could very easily have a site coverage of 40%, and they wouldn't even need a planning permit. So I think in light of the fact that somebody could actually buy this block, knock down the house, put up a 2-storey house, and that it could go up to 60% site coverage without a planning permit because it was one dwelling, it puts this in perspective somewhat. There's some reasonable private open space. I think that the lack of driveway at the front of the property actually visually is quite desirable. So whilst I acknowledge that the laneway causes difficulties for access, the fact that the front of the property presents in the way that it will, I think, makes it quite a visually more appealing property.
Thank you. Councillor Mee.
It's pretty rare for us to see developments where every unit is 3 bedrooms, so that's something that we want to see more of, and certainly something we want to encourage. Also, the low site coverage that Councillor Rennie mentioned struck me as well, that developers could have crammed a lot more into this site, and we have seen other examples where there's been a lot more crammed on. This is quite a modest development, given the context, given the zoning. It is consistent with the zoning, and while I acknowledge that current residents it might not be what they'd want for their street. We are bound by the planning legislation, and this is consistent. I also acknowledge, it's not that creative, it's not ideal, it's not going to be, the most exciting development in Melbourne, but we do need more houses in Reservoir. The prices in Reservoir are going up and up and up. And so I feel like we have a responsibility to be able to give people access to affordable housing, and this is part of that.
Thank you, Councillor Mee. Any further speakers? No? Councillor Greco.
I'll just quickly again speak against that. Look, I think the key point is about the neighbourhood character. Look, I take the points about the design of the property, but I think if it were 3 single-storey dwellings, then it would be much more acceptable, and I would think that the neighbourhood around that area would be more willing, or in terms of accepting single-storey dwellings. It really, I think, having visited the streets, it really breaks the rhythm of the street. If you can envisage a street where it's predominantly single-storey and you have this double-storey, it really breaks that rhythm that makes that street what it is, and gives that character to the street. And again, I think that the neighbourhood character test is a very important test. I mean, it's we could talk a lot about the technicalities of particular applications, but the key test that I find in assessing these applications is that does it sit well in relation to that particular location. and I'm afraid that it doesn't. If it were to come back to us as a new application, an amended application with even possibly 2 or 3 single-story dwellings, then that could clearly be entertained. But given the double-story nature of it, it's very hard for me to accept that.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour and against? Motion is carried. The Planning Committee has decided to grant the planning permit. This decision can be appealed to VCAT. Objectors have 21 days in which to lodge an appeal with VCAT. The applicant has 60 days. Notice detailing the decision tonight and how an appeal can be lodged will be sent to all objectors and the applicant over the next week. Moving on to the next item, item 6, other business. 6.1, general planning information, scheduled VCAT applications. Moved by Councillor McCarthy, seconded by Councillor Greco. All those in favour? That motion is carried. Item 7, urgent business. Is there any urgent business? No, no urgent business. And that brings us to the close of the meeting. So thank you everybody for attending the meeting this evening.